Welcome everybody to the Podman Community Cabal meeting. Today is Thursday, January 19th, 2023 already. We've got a number of topics today. We have one for Podman 4.4, an update from Matt Hinn, a discussion from Ed Santiago about auto-closing issues, and then Urvashi had another one that was probably coming in, so we'll add that at the end of the meeting if we can get that arranged over the next few minutes. So given all that, I will just say that I'm going to be taking notes from the agenda link within the HackMD. If you want to add stuff there, if you have any links that you want to keep going forward for the notes, please add them there. And or if I type something that's just wrong, feel free to correct me there. So Matt, I'll hand it over to you to start us up.
All right, this is going to be a relatively brief update because we don't actually have release notes yet, so I can't highlight the features that are going to be included. I believe that Ashley is going to be working on those soon, so we should have more to talk about soon. But anyways, Podman 4.4 is presently in release candidate stage. RC2 came out this week. RC3 should be forthcoming soon. And then hopefully we have a 4.4 final next week. This is going to be a fairly substantial release, I expect. It's been a while since we did a previous one. And yeah, unfortunately, don't have much to talk about feature-wise yet. Hopefully be able to talk about that soon.
Oh, no sneak peeks at all, huh?
Unfortunately, no. Until we have the release notes, it's hard to determine what's actually important there. We do have quadlet support, which is pretty big. We've taken quadlet, which, if you don't know, is a separate executable that used to basically it's able to run Podman containers under systemd in a very efficient way. Previously, it was a separate project. Now integrated into Podman itself, it's still going to be a separate executable, but we've moved it into the repo. We're going to be doing releases for it as part of Podman.
And Lokesh noted in the chat that 4.4 RC2 will be available on updates testing soon on Fedora, and he gave a link there if you're interested in that. And does anybody have any questions for Matt about 4.4? Okay, then let's move along and we'll hand it over to Ed, who's going to be talking about auto-closing issues. And he has a link which is in the agenda posted here for people to grab from the chat. Ed, go ahead.
So the Cargill spike, and the purpose of it was to find a way to, as I understand it, auto-close PRs and issues. The reason being that we have a lot of spent a lot of time with the auto stale bot saying this PR, this issue is not having any activity in 30 days, and people having to go, is this still alive? What's going on with this? I honestly don't see a way to automate this. If you look at the Jira thing, I wrote some tools to categorize issues into buckets by age. Basically, ones that have been open more than 30 days, more than 60, more than 120. And then there's also the ones that are marked stale, which is not necessarily the same. The stale bot marks ones as stale, and then humans come and remove the stale tag. And sometimes the stale bot comes back and retags them, and sometimes not. I don't understand the deal there. What I ended up doing, I think if you look at the last comment, I added a jetsam tag or label to GitHub. Jetsam being a word for crap that you just throw overboard when you're sinking because you don't care about it enough to not sink. I applied it to a few issues and decided to close those and mark them as jetsam, with maybe the idea being that in some fantasy land, in the future, somebody will go through those and maybe pick at them and fix them. And I closed I closed a handful of issues, and sort of not disaster, but bad things ensued. I removed some skips for tests. And some of those issues had not actually been fixed. And two, yesterday, Hendrik sent results on getting test failures in RHEL, and it's pretty catastrophic. The failures are really, really bad on RHEL. So I'm really going to suggest we can maybe use the Jetsam tag. I'd like to hear people's opinions about it, but I do not think we should be auto-closing any issues. Go ahead, Valentin.
Yeah, I agree on auto-closing. I acknowledge and see the same problem, that it's very hard to somehow tame the upstream beasts, because issues are flying in, pull requests are flying in limited time, varying priorities or ever-changing priorities. But one experience that we made firsthand with the stale bot was that initially it also closed after 60 days. The issues or the pull requests. And understandably, some community members or the people who opened it, the reporters, for instance, of an issue, were quite upset because, well, they took the time to report it, but then it just went into nirvana. And I recently saw somewhere upstream or on Twitter, I think I engaged a conversation. I can look it up, where people were complaining exactly about this bot, because there's a GitHub bot, apparently an official one, and in the default setting, it's still closing apparently issues after a time limit. I think it's 2 months or so, and it's, well, people perceive it as being hostile, towards the time and efforts of others. So I also feel like that this could backfire, or that can backfire to the maintainers or to the project if we auto close. At the same time, I think, or today and yesterday, I spent some time working or going over old pull requests and old issues in varying orders. Oldest to newest, newest to oldest, and sometimes just the machete sequence of picking random pages and random issues. And, well, quite a number could be closed. So maybe we can improve, but I do not know how. I do not have an idea on how to improve it. But I just wanted to highlight that I agree that auto closing is probably not the best way.
Thank you. Anybody else on auto closing and/or on the possibility of a Jetsam tag, which would be manually applied?
Well, usually if I see one that, if we ask a question to a reporter and the reporter doesn't get back to us, then I close them within 30 days.
Yep.
Just
said that. Total agreement on that. If there's any disagreement at all about that, raise your hand now or forever.
Well, I mean, at worst case, the reporter will come back and say, "Give us the information," then we can reopen it. The ones that are tagged as stale, they don't come up after 30 days. So I usually attempt to remove the stale flags so that we get the reminders after another 30 days. But it is, right now we just use it as a nag to go back and look at them. But I agree. I mean, the difficulty is that it's just, some of them are so low priority that no one has the time to go work on them. And unless we have a community person, it's probably not likely. There's always a higher priority thing that's coming along. And if we look at other projects there, they have issues in the thousands and hundreds of thousands. So, yeah.
So one thing I found useful in my little table, and it would be really nice if I could find some way to regenerate that table weekly or daily and post it somewhere. That's not going to happen on Jira because I don't have automation tools to auto post on Jira. Is looking at the last column, but looking at total issues open, it's mind-boggling. It's overwhelming. Looking at the right-hand column, that's a short list. That's something that I'm bored one day. I can click on that link, look at that list, and say, "Oh yeah, I can close this one, or I can tackle this one." Would that be useful to somebody if this table could be somehow auto-generated and auto-updated?
The third column is just the stale column, right? Of the column you're talking about, or you're talking about the 120 days?
I didn't find the 120 days column very useful, but I haven't played with it as much. I don't have the perspective to play with it with the eyes of, okay, this has been languishing for too long, and some of them, especially the flakes, are mine. But I'd like to see what people think of these, and I can update that table later today and have people take a look at it and offer opinions.
Might be interesting to look at features versus bugs. So if a feature is 120 days old, is like, okay, no one really has an interest in developing this feature, so should we close those? Or at least review them to see if they should be closed.
Yeah, I think there should always be a human in any case to close, such that there's, some sanity checks, and also that the human is responsible and not a bot. So that there's, accountability there. But ironically, the oldest feature request is still something we desire. It's just a lot of work, and priorities fly in. It probably has a lower medium priority, and there's always some top priority. It probably depends on what we're optimizing for. I think there will be a growing amount of issues or feature requests that would like to get addressed, but do not have the time for. So I think the baseline will probably continue to grow, and for me, that's okay.
Yep.
So I brought this up, I think, for the last Cabal, community Cabal last year. And for me, it isn't so much about automatically closing issues or something like that. That's always pretty much manual reviewing, reading that stuff. But things like logging conversations on old closed issues. We have, I don't know, constantly get some random notification because somebody wrote on a 4-year-old bug report that he sees the same issue now. Like, open a new one, follow the steps. That's what we say. And things like that can be avoided if we do step. So I was thinking in steps like these. Log issues that are closed for like a month or something, then log them, and then have like.
Does GitHub have the capability of doing that?
Not by default, but there are bots to do it. So
okay, that's an interesting idea. I think it's a tangent to this Jira issue. What I'd like to do, I'm acknowledging Miloslav's comments about not seeing any benefits. Go ahead, Miloslav, but I would like to call on Brent after you because Brent is the original reporter, and I would like to know what Brent had originally intended. But Miloslav, go, please.
Just a short point. Locking old closed issues is directly incompatible with auto-closing, I think. Because if we auto close issues that get no action, we will just get another one, and then we'll end up with 5 issues tracking the same underlying cause, and that's worse than having one that is stale.
Okay, and I'm not hearing strong support for auto closing, so I'm going to say let's just abandon that idea. Chris, we'll get to you in a second. Brent, could you address what you had intended, please?
Yeah, can you remind me what I wrote down or told you? This has been a long while now.
Description: our team needs to consider and document EOL end-of-life policies for PRs and issues. How long should a PR be allowed to be inactive? Same for issues. What about issues that do not have required information? This spike is to document the policies so we can socialize them among the team and the community. As a follow-on, another card will be created for implementing some automation of the policies where possible.
So I think the big ones for me were let's assume we had a developer ask the reporter for information and we don't get a response for however long we determine. To me, those are closable issues. And if they want to re-report them or ask to open them up again because it's now important again, that's fine. You'll likely need some sort of key to be able to, to work from for something like a need info type tag. And essentially, if it's marked need info and there hasn't been a comment for 45 days, then retire it. So that's a big one. I couldn't agree more with Paul. It would be nice to somehow find a way to lock closed things after 30 days. Once it's been closed, because there is a week or two there where people may be trying to verify it or whatever else, but because the PR closed it doesn't mean we've actually always heard from the user. We get that a lot with the Apple and the Apple stuff where they report the same error, but it's very clear that it's not the same bug. So that's where the closing would probably save a lot of manual intervention of saying this bug's closed, please open a new one. But more or less, it was looking for simple grooming like that. No comment for 45 days. So we could do the same with PRs. And
I think the no comment should be 30 days. So
yeah, I mean, whatever the team feels.
That's what I do manually. I mean, I would love it if those just closed. We had a stock answer saying you didn't answer within 30 days. So
yeah, just a friendly message.
Yep.
We're closing this, but feel free to ask to reopen or blah blah blah. But I would think the same would be applicable on pull requests in terms of haven't heard anything for so long, we mark it and the timer starts going. I think to me those are all fair. Is that enough?
That sounds reasonable to me. Any dissent?
Yep. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to pitch in?
I just was going to share something on the automation side of things. There is a way to post sort of nice looking tables in Markdown on GitHub Actions as a GitHub gist, and then you can link to the gist so everybody's got access to a table if you want to, like pre-sort issues into a look at these now for different categories. I've got a couple of examples.
So
I think we could,
another thing.
I think one thing I just started brainstorming, and I don't mean to take it here because that we're really dealing with more broad questions, but it would be reasonably trivial, I think, with the OpenShift bot that follows things, that if a meet info was added to a PR, it would put a message in like, you know, we haven't had we're looking for information, and if it doesn't show up in 30 days, this issue will be closed, that kind of a thing. So when we do start the timer, whatever. I mean, I think there are plenty of ways to do this with enough heads up and whatever that we can. So I'll go back. Paul was going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to bring attention to another thing. I thought about it because the initial like triaging of an issue, like often, like we have this, I would say, informal rule, like we don't support old releases, we only support the latest version. And we have constantly reports of older versions, and there would be some automation that says that isn't the latest version. If there's Podman info, we can see that. And then some form of please verify this against the latest version and stuff like that.
But what would we, let's take the Ubuntu case. What would we do if there's just no easy way to do it? So I think this, or I feel this would be hard to automate. Assuming, so I'm personally more interested in an easy reproducer where I can just, you know, check it myself if it's still happening in the main branch or on the latest version in Fedora, which happens to always have the latest Podman release. But I'm not sure whether we can apply that rule to all users and all distros.
Well, an easy reproducer is always nice. I agree there. And there you could even do, if you go fancy, you could even run this automatically if there's a good format. But let's not think about this for a second. But what I am at is like these old 3.4 issues or something in Ubuntu. Like, to me, this is upstream. I don't care if it doesn't work there. And then they should report these bugs against Ubuntu or whatever. So these distros. And same, we have the like Tom always says this, rel issues should be bugzillas for rel tracking. We constantly have, rel isn't so far behind in versions. We can take a look upstream. That's not a big deal for me, but for tracking and stuff, it's so much better to have these older versions go through distro bug reporting, in my opinion.
I think we can shoot ourselves in the knee by being too strict about it, because just because it's an older version doesn't mean that the problem doesn't apply to you know, the main branch. One way or another, we need to reproduce it. I personally, in case it's rel, or sometimes people report against SUSE Linux Enterprise, so SLES, I always make sure to drop that if they want it backported, then they should reach out through the customer channels of, you know, the companies. But personally, I don't care that much about the version. I care about whether it's still applicable. Even if it's the latest version in Fedora, we may have already fixed it in the main branch. You know what I mean? So in a way, versions are somehow ambiguous.
Yes, but why should I do the work to try the reproducer on the latest version, you know? Why is this my task? The reproducer, I mean, if it's a simple one, I will do it. Absolutely. I go through pretty much all issues. I do that. But like the reproducer gets complicated and depends on your environment all of a sudden, then I have no chance. So I go latest version.
I agree. We have no chance. If it's too complicated, then it's hard. But why should we do it? Because, well, depending on, you know, I'm paid for doing at least partially, but it's also in our own interest. People take time to report something, so we need to try to do the best of the information we have at hand.
So this is a really useful conversation, but it's veered completely off the rails from the original topic of policies and auto-closing and stale old issues. Does anybody have any objection to continuing this tangent?
We do have another topic that's come in that I'd like to get to.
I'd like to talk about Ubuntu as a Cabal topic upon its own, because Paul's tugging on some really good things here, and these are things we've been carrying the weight of for years. So to me, just talking about our challenges with Ubuntu is one or more Cabal topics.
Okay, I'm marking this issue closed. Chris, thank you for your information on gists. Everybody, thank you for your suggestions and confirmations of my findings. And Tom, proceed with next or this topic. Thank you.
Thanks all. Was a really good discussion. We do have somebody coming in today, and I will apologize in advance for butchering her name badly. It's Akansha. Am I close?
Hi, that's correct. It's Akanksha.
Akansha. Okay, I was in the neighborhood anyway. We weren't able to get her time to work in for community meetings, so we've gone ahead and given her some time today to do a little demo of a project that she's been working on. So with that, I will hand it over to her.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So, hey, everyone. My name is Akanksha Tukkal, and I'm a senior data scientist in the Emerging Technologies Data Science team. And today I'm here to tell you all about the Time to Merge tool that we've been working on. So I'm going to start with giving some context on this project and the background on where we are coming from. So before we get into the depth of the Time to Merge tool, I would like to introduce you to the project that we initially started working on. And the problem that we're trying to address here is that there's a need for automated monitoring, alerting, AI-driven analysis for operations and testing systems, and open source testing data that is originating from the real world production systems is a rarity for public data sets. And we have noticed that there's a lack of AI-driven metrics for the open source community health. And that brings us to the opportunity of leveraging data sets that are made available by various Kubernetes testing systems like Prow, OpenShift CI, GitHub, Fedora, etc. And this brings us to the project called AI for CI, which is nothing but a collection of open source data science tools and AI machine learning models that collect and analyze the CI/CD data. And the eventual goal is to foster an open source AI ops community with open operations data, AI tools, and services. So as a part of this project, AI for CI, we periodically collect the open operations data originating from the OpenShift testing systems like Proud, Test Grid, GitHub, etc., and make them available for analysis. We create a collection of the open operational data sets, and then we collect some key performance indicator metrics from CI/CD data and visualize them on dashboards. We've also built some machine learning services like GitHub Time to Merge model, which predicts the time taken to a new pull request to be merged. Then there's an optimal stopping point classifier that helps us stop the long running tests after a certain point if they are definitely going to fail after that. There's build log classifier, which classifies logs, the Prow logs, on the basis of the type of failure. And we also share the Jupyter notebooks, the scripts, the dashboards, and the pipelines that make up these tools. And we have all these notebooks, templates, and scripts, all of them available as template while we are building this open while we are building this on the Open Operate First Community Cloud. So finally, to come onto the time to merge model. So what is time to merge? It is precisely the time taken for a new pull request to be merged on a GitHub repository. And it's a classification model which helps classify the time taken to merge a PR that falls into one of the few predefined time ranges. And a metric like this could help identify bottlenecks within the development processes, and a label or a time estimate can also give new contributors an estimate of when their issue or PR will be reacted upon, or when will their pull request be merged. And this could also help encourage contribution to an open source community. And model on this metric, predictors of time to review, time to triage, can encourage contributions from within the community as well. So now this is the kind of process that we follow to build this tool. So we first start by collecting the pull requests from the repositories, and we try to find out the relevant features that we would like to study before we pass them to our time to merge model. And then the model returns a time to merge estimate, and we use this custom trained model via GitHub Action to actually provide live predictions by adding a comment on your pull request. I'm going to share more details about this with my demo, but let's take a deeper look into the process that we follow along. So the first step is to collect the historical pull request data from the user-provided repositories using the GitHub API. And once we have the data, we take a look at the features from the PR, like size of the PR, types of files that were changed, the day of the week it was created, number of commits, size of the description, if there were any top words that were mentioned in the title, and then we automatically assign the feature importances and pick the most important features for every individual repository. And finally, we take a look at some classification models. Here we have a few vanilla classifier models that we look at, and and we actually try to find out which model is performing the best on the data that we were provided with, and then finally try to make a prediction on the best working model on the data. And to integrate this with the user repository and make the training and deployment of this model easier, we've started to use GitHub Actions. So using GitHub Actions and GitHub workflows and leveraging the environment and computing resources of the GitHub hosted runners, one can train this model for their own repository and integrate this tool with their own community as well. So this is a high-level architecture diagram of the tool that we have set up. I'm not going to go over in too much of detail, but the parts that I want to highlight here are that every time a new pull request is triggered on the repository, or even on demand, you can run this workflow. It can be started in two modes. The first one is the training mode, and the second one is the inference mode. So every time there's a new repository, we would definitely want to train our model first. And once we have a custom model that we've saved in S3 storage, we can just continue to use the inference mode, where it just quickly runs the inference to see where this pull request stands. And if we were to train this model on the new repository, we run a bunch of steps, like starting from collecting the pull request data, pre-processing, and drawing inferences from the new data. And all of this information is backed by an S3 storage, where we actually store the data that we've collected, and we also save the model. And also want to highlight that this tool is not a monolithic service. It's not a huge model which caters to all the repos and communities. Rather, there would be small instances of this model for each repository that we train it on. And as you can see, we have already installed this tool in a bunch of repos. It's pretty easy to use it by yourself, but if needed, our team can also help you in the installation of this tool to your repo. So taking a deeper look into what we have, in terms of the action, GitHub action that we've built so far. So the first component is the action metadata, which defines the inputs to this tool and the output parameters. And as I've mentioned earlier, there are two modes that you can run your tool as. So the first one is the training and inference, and the second one is the only inference part. And the output here is going to be just like the trained model that gets saved to S3 and a prediction on the pull request, or it could be just a prediction on the last pull request that your repository had. And there's also a Docker file which specifies the base image that this tool is running on, and there's an entry point script that helps the container understand what kind of steps it needs to follow. And to take a deeper look into this file, if you run it in the mode 1, it starts by collecting data, engineering the features, training the model, and finally running the inference. And if you run it just in the inference mode, it will just run the inference notebook for you. And finally, we'll cover more of this in the demo, but on high level, if someone is to use this workflow, which is set up as a container action, we can specify this action in the workflow file in the repo and with some environment variables. And the result is going to be either the training and prediction of the workflows, and a GitHub Actions bot will actually comment on the PR just like this, and giving an estimate of how much time it is actually going to take for a pull request to be merged. So now I'm gonna quickly take you guys over the demo for a better understanding of how it works. All right. So this is a repository that I actually own. So you need like 100% access of any repository you're setting this up on. Also, I'm just going to show this demo, but there's also a very well-written README that you could follow along if you want to do a DIY installation of this tool. But for now, I'm just going to quickly go over the context. So you set up the secrets and variables in the action category, and you define a few secrets like S3 access ID, secret access key, Ceph bucket details, and your personal GitHub access token, which can actually help extract the data from the pull request, and also define the repository and the organization here in the secrets itself. So this is one part. And the second part is going to be adding two small files to your GitHub workflows. You don't have to change anything at all. So the first file is going to be the trainttm.yaml, and you just have to copy this exact file. What it's going to do is it's actually going to interact with our container image and extract the environment variables and run our action in mode 1, which is the training mode. And this is what the train TTM file does. And the predict TTM file is exactly the same, just that the mode value is set to 0 here. And once you've added these 3 things to your repository, you're all set. And if you go to actions, you can actually see 2 sorts of workflows that are installed to your GitHub repository. One of them is run time to merge. You can actually go ahead and trigger a new run to retrain your model. We're actually also working on converting this into an automated thing. So say after n number of PRs, the model is automatically going to train itself. But that is something which is a part of our future works. But as of now, you can manually go ahead and retrain your model as and when required. And otherwise, every time you add a new pull request, the predict time to merge will automatically trigger itself and start to run. So I'm going to give you a small example of how that's going to work out. So if I go to new pull request, I'm going to do test TTM. I'm just going to create a pull request. All right, I'm going to say this is a test and create pull request. And now, since I've already ran it once, it was showing as passed. But now every time you add a new pull request, it's going to trigger a new run for predict time to merge. You can check out more details about this pipeline here. You can also go to actions and check it out. So here's the pipeline, and it's going to start the job. and start by interacting with the container, then walking around with the entry point shell script and doing one step at a time. And just to give you a further deeper look, like if you see the time to merge model training, it took around 3 minutes to complete the action. But if you take just the inference ones, it takes around like 2 minutes or so. So maybe if you can wait for 2 minutes, I can show that this actually worked and finished and made a prediction on the pull request that I just added. Besides this, while this is running, I'm going to quickly take you to the GitHub repository, which is the home to this tool. It's called Time to Merge tool, and it's under the Red Hat ET org. And there's a README, which has a very detailed set of instructions that you must follow if you want to do it yourself. So if there are any questions or doubts in the README, please feel free to add issues or contact me. But other than that, this was my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have any. So over to you.
Thanks. That's great. I did have one myself. Is there a way to ignore a particular user? So we have these auto bots that do stuff very quickly, and I would just be afraid that it would throw off the curve.
Yeah, so our model actually excludes the bots when it comes to training them. So we have added that feature, but if it comes to a particular user that you don't want to count, you can actually predefine that to our model, and you can exclude a particular user.
Cool. Anybody else?
So for the, what is the benefit to me as the human being?
I mean, it's not so much as a human being, but as a community. I've presented this in a bunch of conferences, and a lot of communities have actually shown interest in this project, because a lot of time when the first time contributors or absolutely new contributors come to a GitHub repository and put a pull request, they're often afraid that will someone ever look at our PR? Is our PR even worth it? Is our issue even capable of being heard? So a community and an effort like this would actually provide them some feedback and some kind of response that will actually make them feel important, and would also help them engage more. If say person added a pull request and we say that, hey, your pull request is going to be addressed in another 4 days. So that gives you a timeline and something to look forward to when you're adding a pull request. So it's mainly just for the community health more than just a benefit for human beings.
Well, I'm suspecting it's a human being opening a pull request. So your salesmanship has to improve. It's a big improvement for someone opening up a full pull request.
Yeah.
What you just said. So
okay. I think it's an interesting tool, but I also think for our project, at least at the Podman repository, we are very good at responding quickly to PRs and issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so at least if you're doing it like during the week, that you will have a response at least. And if you don't do it if you do it at US time, I would say you have a response in an hour or so. Like that's so I'm not sure if there's much value for Podman, but for other repositories, I think that are not like watched every day, but by us, I think that there it could be interesting.
Is there?
Go ahead, John.
Are there reports generated on this, on ideas of I don't know, it's a benefit to us that we could get data out of this to,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
So not as of now.
Usually this type of PR requires,
yeah,
you know.
So not as of now. This is in a very early stage at the moment. Like we just finished this first POC in December, but like we're definitely open for feedback and any sort of ideas that you think we should integrate with our tool, and we'd be happy to add that. But like definitely the report bit is in the pipeline, and that's something that we plan to look into.
I'd be also super interested in that kind of data, purely motivated by self-interest, to know how long it takes to triage or to respond. So a dashboard for maintainers, I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, that's in our
Well,
pipeline. We're definitely working on that in Q1. So we'll be done with that soon.
Awesome.
But I couldn't help but hear about your issue about auto closing of the issues. We also have a sister team called Thought, and they have a Thought bot which actually manages the auto closing of stale issues. So I'm happy to share the link and the bot details if you guys are interested. We actually use it for most of our repos, and it actually marks the issues as stale after every 30 or 90 days as per the user requirement. So since you guys have been having a lot of discussion around that, I thought that would be something interesting to look at.
One interesting thing that could potentially come out of this would be, we've had other pull requests similar to this that have been rejected for X, Y, and Z, and then give the user feedback on, or at least links to the other pull request. I don't know how many we, if it could discover that, but I'm trying to think of what. I'd be interesting to see how it works and see how smart it is. So
yeah, we actually collect every single detail that comes with the pull request, starting from the username, where that person's working from, which day they added the commit, and we keep on adding this data, and our model actually automatically identifies what features are important as to predict what time it takes for a pull request to be merged. For say some repositories have a lot of pull requests, then features might be different for them as compared to a repository that has smaller number of pull requests. So this could be very different from repository to repository, but we definitely would love to interact with communities which have more than 100 pull requests, because that actually gives amazing results. Like I would say more than 60 to 70% accuracy most of the time. So considering Podman is a very well-established community, we could get some amazing results if you guys were to try this out.
It runs as a GitHub action. Is there a training mode, not offline, but non-live, where you could run on the huge data set of PRs that have been already submitted to get data and possibly to get trends over time as well?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question properly. Can you please repeat it?
Would you run your tool right now, take it on the Podman or build a repository, get historical data, and make and get either predictions so that you can we could start running it today and get useful predictions, or get trend data to see how PR lag time has changed over the last 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think we will be able to easily fetch the historical data which exists on GitHub, and we can use all the closed PRs and all the past PRs from how many years this community has been running from, and definitely start working the minute after the pull request is merged. And also, one more interesting thing about this tool is that it does not require any external resources. This runs end-to-end on GitHub. There's only one resource that we require, which is the S3 bucket. Other than that, we don't need any sort of OpenShift instance or any model surveying, model training platforms. So we definitely just use GitHub for entire process. And I'm certain that if we were to run this on the Podman community, it will train on the historical data that you have available.
Okay, just before I forget, Kasha, would you mind sending us or sending me the slides so I can add them to the notes? For
Sure, I will do that.
Okay, and is there a good way for people to contact you through your GitHub is that the best way for folks to get in contact with you if they're interested?
Sure, yeah, I will add the details in the document.
Okay. And then could you add a link also in the chat here for your auto closing project that you mentioned? I'm not sure that
Oh yeah, for sure.
know
I'm
where
going to
that
add
is.
it right away.
Just so we can take a look at that. I may want to take a cruise through it quickly anyway.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Mm-hmm. I've actually added a sample issue which has ThoughtBot acting all over it. So you can take a look at it and then you can actually directly contact ThoughtBot. So this is an example of one of the issues that it has been commenting on, saying that this is stale. And if you want to close it, take this action and so on and so forth. This is just an example of that.
Great, thank you.
Chris or Red, would you be interested in enabling this to see how it works?
With a different name, I think rotten has emotional connotations that we might not want to take on to. But yes, I will be. I've added it to my notes. I will look into it. Chris?
No, not particularly. It's interesting, but I think the it seems like a lot of work for not really sure how useful it would be to the end user, for at least in our particular use case.
Well, it's not only how long it's going to take, but it can also be a marketing plus if people are going to other projects and they're saying it's taking 3 weeks to get stuff in, and they come over to Podman and it's averaging 3 days.
Yeah, again, I think it's like, it just seems like a lot of implementation to get an answer like that, where and also because we've got like, it's not just Podman, right? The projects sometimes will have issues that span multiple repositories, so that would be less useful in that type of situation. I think it seems like a really handy thing to have for like a huge project like something like Ansible, that's got a massive community and is just really big in general. Then I can see it being it would probably be useful in that kind of a context. But Podman just seems too small at this point. Not that it's small. But.
Okay, I'm going to wrap that up and thank Akanksha again for coming and showing that to us, and move on to the open discussion, which we only have a few minutes for. Does anybody have any questions they wanted to ask? And Lance, did you have one? Anybody? Questions? Open questions? Otherwise, I'm going to. Oh, go ahead, Martin.
I really excited about the 4.4 pending release, and I've been playing with the pre-release bits already. I put a note in the Bodhi tracker for Fedora 37. One thing that I noticed is that I had a bunch of old CNI config files for previous containers that I had started and run before 4.4, and it threw up some really ugly warnings. It didn't actually prevent any of them from working, but short of deleting those things, the actual conf files from my personal CNI net directory, the warnings were kind of there. Is that expected? Is that something that might be worth a release note or something?
Can you provide me a link?
It's in the.
We shouldn't change anything between 4.3 and 4.4 in that kind of area or code. So I would say it's not expected.
Okay. Well, Bodhi is. Yeah. I checked. I had both Podman and Podman plugins installed. I'm not sure where the CNI stuff fits between those things. And I had been doing some things with Podman Compose before and Docker Compose before any of this, before Quadlet support and all those things came into the project. As I was, experimenting with different ways to get things running. Before that, it startled me. I forgot that I had those files sitting around. I didn't know that those files were even created, and I saw those warnings on RC2.
And 4.3.1 doesn't show the same warning.
I may have.
It looks strange because this warning is in there since 4.0. So if you only see it now, the only reason you could see it now if container networking plugins RPM was removed. That's the only reason why you would see this.
Okay, I didn't look for container networking plugins.
Just looking at our time, which is running out quickly.
Sorry.
Can we ask if there are any other questions? And if people want to stay after the meeting and hash this out some more, that's perfectly fine. Right, I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm sorry about my phone going off in the background there. So our next meeting will be on Thursday, February 16th, which is yet another Cabal meeting. And our next community easy for me to speak, community meeting will be on Tuesday, February 7th. And with that, I'm going to close out the recorded portion of this meeting. Thanks all.